So we're at the last one of the day. Before we share our thoughts on this, I want to put this message out here to our community. Next subject, the Atlanta shooting that occurred. This is definitely a very tough subject to discuss. We are all going to be sharing our individual views, which again are representative of each one of us singularly and not representative of the group as a whole. But in general, we operate with agreement that it is never our intention to specifically offend any one party or group. These are simply our views and perspectives on any given subject. So with that said, the official question is, what are your thoughts on the Atlanta shooting and the notion that the shooter had a bad day?
That's all he had?
So in other words, just to elaborate here, the bad day part specifically comes from a captain. His name is Jay Baker with the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office, who made a statement about the incident. And the captain's specific words were, he was pretty much fed up and kind of at the end of his rope. Yesterday was a really bad day for him, and this is what he did. Cherokee County Sheriff's Office Captain Jay Baker said on Wednesday, the day of the shooting. He was describing a 21-year-old man accused of killing 8 people, mostly Asian and almost all women, in a rampage across 3 Atlanta area spas. Those words come directly from the article from the Washington Post that we are going to share when we release this session of the podcast. So I'm gonna go ahead and start here, if you fellas don't mind, because
that's cool.
Like the other,
that's cool. Yeah, I have one quick question.
Sure.
So, because I've been trying to find about the shooter and whatnot. So I heard the shooter was male. Like, did you give any description of like what descent the shooter was?
I believe he was white. I haven't seen that officially, but the article from the Washington Post that we're referencing specifically says he was describing a 21-year-old man, but that's it. But I want to say that it has been mentioned that he was a white male, that I've seen that somewhere, and I'll look that up officially.
Right. Thank you for that clarification.
No problem. So like the previous subject, the reason I wanted to go first is because my point is quite simple, right? Those captain statements, or that captain statement, was absolutely fucking ridiculous. Okay, I don't give a shit about what kind of day the shooter had to make those comments. He was pretty much fed up and kind of at the end of his rope. It's completely ridiculous. It again goes back to not only white privilege, but also underlying inherent racism. The fact that anyone would make an excuse for anyone shooting 8 people is abhorrent in itself. But the only reason that he felt comfortable enough to do that in the first place is because of the privilege that he has.
Bingo.
Because no one else in their right fucking minds would have been comfortable saying some shit like that, regardless of who the crime happened with. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. And it's my understanding that all that has happened thus far is that he has been relieved of being the spokesman on the case, officials say. They said that he faced a difficult task in reporting on that subject. What?
Like I said,
Motherfucker, you're a sheriff, you're a captain in the sheriff's office. It's your responsibility to be tactful in these situations. And it is in no way tactful to put out an excuse on behalf of the shooter. The investigation hasn't even started yet. So the fact that this man felt comfortable enough to make those comments is an example of his privilege. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely offensive as fuck to the victims of the shooting. It's unacceptable because of his role in the sheriff's department. And I want him to have the proper repercussions. Which are what? Some are going to say, what's the proper repercussions? Should he be fired? Should he be? Abso-fucking-lutely. You know why? Because he neglected his duty. It's an ongoing investigation. How are you making excuses already on behalf of the shooter with an ongoing investigation? It was the same day as the shooting. That shows that he already has bias, which to me means I don't have any comfortability in his ability to thoroughly investigate what happened here and provide the appropriate evidence.
Keyword was the shooter had a bad day. Like, yeah.
It's just ridiculous. The entire notion is ridiculous. It's representative of many, many things. The top one being his privilege, allowing him to have the comfortability to even say all of that. And then there's one more side of it that I want to touch on really quickly before I throw it to you to wrap up our sessions today. And that is, there's another side of it where people have asked me, how come Black people in particular are so quick to cape, and I'm throwing this word in quotation marks up, okay, for the Asian community and other communities when they don't cape for us. Okay, so let me just, I'm gonna say touch briefly on this because this is another subject that can end up being its own session, right? Which is why we're gonna have our own session, a singular session on racism. But let me just say this. I am a person who sees human beings for what they are, even though I'm a realist. At the end of the day, the reality that we live in is equality doesn't exist. Equality doesn't even exist when you're talking about racism. We are not all equally treated badly when it comes to racism. It's that simple. No other race of people went through 400 years of oppression in the country they helped build. It's that simple. I'm not saying that Asian Americans or Hispanics or any other minority didn't experience racism or don't. They absolutely have, but they have not experienced it to the extent of Black people. They have not.
Nope.
And it is not the same experience that is happening today. How many Asian American stories have you heard just in the last 10 to 15 years of these unarmed folks dying at the hands of police officers? Not even just Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, whatever the case may be. So what I said all of that to say, I'm not saying that we shouldn't stand together. I believe that anyone that's willing to do right, should be given the same amount of respect from an equality standpoint as anyone else. However, you have to understand why there are some people who say, well, I would like to see a little more unity from our minority sister and brothers, because it seems like we don't get the same level of support that we're expected to give out. So in other words, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Me personally, I personally believe that any group of people for any cause that stand united has much more impact than people who try to address any situation separately. That's with any cause. However, I definitely understand why some Black people feel like, well, I can't be responsible for saving every other minority because I have to focus on the Black community first. I get both sides of it. And that's just my thoughts on it. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this to E-Man, and then Mr. PAT, you'll wrap us up for the day.
Thank you so much. Cause yeah. But and the reason why I asked about, because I didn't know too much about the shooter, but I was on IG and I follow a lot of people on IG. I gotta double check, but I think it was the Black Wealth Network on IG that I followed. And I thought I saw a Asian woman that said that, the shooter might be black and whatnot. But I gotta probably rewatch the video and
Oh
hopefully
no, the
I could
shooter was
probably.
white.
Oh, but the shooter's actually white. That's
Yeah,
why I wanted some clarifications.
yeah, they
Yeah.
showed a picture of him. It's a white dude.
Oh,
Right.
okay. So, but and to continue the story, to start off and just going one night, the captain started off and said that the shooter had a bad day. I know plenty of people have bad days. Many people have bad days. But I don't think people who have bad days just goes up into a mall area and goes shoot up women. You know? Yeah. I don't know who does that. I don't, you know. Just because you had a bad day doesn't mean you need to go break something that doesn't belong to you. It's it's just it's very sick because I had a conversation about it with somebody just 2 days ago. And I basically stated, that, the person I had the conversation, he stated basically, it seems like, there's Asian racism going around because what has happened towards that whole shooting. And I, followed up and just stated that it seems now we're about to create a huge race war now where we're about to divide everyone over everything now, because now they want all of us to react when, well, 8 Asian women got shot. Now everyone should be uproaring and screaming, It's it's extremely hard, and I'm gonna use my words it's extremely hard to not know what happened and what's not going on because everything's happened. So I tell everyone, do not let your emotions get it to you in the moment until you know the full story and situation. Towards this shooter and whatnot, I hope he gets the death penalty, because he innocently killed 8 women. I don't care if they're Asian and I don't care if they're black, but you killed people for no apparent reason, you know? And it's very sick and it's very vile. But for a man who has a job who to tell people on live TV and state that the shooter had a bad day, man, you might as well just put your badge in your locker and just not come into work the next day. You just let million people know that the man had a bad day. A lot of people have bad days, but to really show the insensitiveness about what you said, and it drives me like and the reason why I really didn't want to read too much into, because I would have been extremely, like, I'm still extremely hurt by it because it doesn't make any sense towards what that chief said and what this shooter did and whatnot. And I'm so speechless right now because I thought I would have more to say, but every time I keep trying to get more and more of my thoughts out, I still have more rage and anger, because it it's just very sickening, you know? You don't know what those people had to do that day, you know? But it's worse that they were caught in a situation over somebody's sick and vile, supposedly bad day, you know? And 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 I'm sorry, PH, you gotta take it this one. I gotta catch my breath for a little bit.
All right, it's cool. So My thoughts on the Atlanta shooting is that it was egregious. Really, any mass shooting that we can think of, I feel the same way. It's egregious. Anytime innocent lives are taken, it's very tragic. But unfortunately, this is the world we live in, and this is what white supremacy does.
Yep.
Overt white supremacy in this case took lives with a gun, while covert white supremacy said that the shooter had a bad day. Again, this goes back to protecting whiteness. When a non-white person kills people, they're a thug, they're a terrorist. Basically, they're everything bad under the sun. But when a white person murders people, they were having a bad day.
Preach, sir.
Now, I'm going to pivot a little bit and say that, honestly, and Naya, you did speak to this point, some of us, and when I say us, I'm talking about Black people, we are asking Asians why they want our help and solidarity now. I'll be honest, I'm one of those Black people asking that question. I'm at the point in my life where, of course, I'm very upfront and outspoken, and I'm out there with my pro-Blackness. So I'm at the point in my life where I prioritize Black people over everyone else. And reason being is all these other minority groups, Asians, Latinos, whoever you want to name, they prioritize their own people. So I just think Black people need to be doing the same. It's not about not caring about anybody else or not sympathizing or empathizing. It's not about that. Of course, we're all human beings. I'm a human being. I'm humane in my being. So, of course, when bad things happen to people, regardless of what race they are, I'm gonna feel it. I'm gonna feel it. And of course, I don't wish for bad things to happen to people. But at the same time, I'm a realist and I know what world we live in.
Exactly.
Different racial groups prioritize their own people. It's really that simple. And I just think Black people need to do that. It's really about survival at this point. So while the attacks on Asians is wrong, Black people are aware of and have experienced the anti-Black racism within the Asian community. When things happen to Black people, Asians aren't out there in droves standing up for us. There is no big minority coalition, at least not the way that the media portrays. Every race outside of Black people take care of their own race and they prioritize their own race, like I said before. And the truth of the matter is there is anti-Black racism and hostility towards Black people within these same minority groups. I know, yeah. I mean, I know. And I'm sorry, this might be one of my more long-winded ones, but I'm gonna get through it as fast as I can. But I'm also gonna say that I know that Asians have gone through discrimination and injustices, but we got to be real here. Asians typically assimilate and they align with the system of white supremacy. For the most part,
interesting.
They don't
That's
fight.
A very interesting fact. But
I mean, I'm just being real, and just for the most part, they don't fight white supremacy. At least I'm talking about Asians in America, because I understand if we look at history, Asians and Europeans had their, had their back and forth. But I'm talking.
I just found out Asians actually have affirmative action also too.
Right, they've been benefiting off that. So when I'm speaking more so about Asians in America.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is they don't fight white supremacy. I'm gonna just say it straight out like that. I mean, I haven't seen it. I'm sure that there are individuals out there of Asian descent who have fought against the system, but overall, I haven't seen it. And this is not to put Asians down or anything like that, but this is something that just needs to be said. If now let's think about it like this. If you are considered the quote unquote model minority, then the question would really be, why would you fight white supremacy? Especially if the system of white supremacy has allowed you to prosper within its framework. So the Black people who are indifferent are being that way for a reason. We're not indifferent for no reason. And these are just some uncomfortable truths that are coming to the surfaece.
Right.
Now,
That's very interesting you said that.
Yeah.
Because I know, because I love Asian. I'm around a lot of Asian people, and I love them a lot. And many of them, and I didn't know this, some towards the affirmative action, the main reason why they use this is because white supremacists don't want them at their table and whatnot. Because many, and I know everyone uses the big, what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for? I would say so many, supposedly, many people see many of those who are Asian, they see them as very intelligent, beings, because
stereotype.
And yeah, there it goes. I was looking for the word stereotype. They use that big stereotype, and they feel that we need to do something to keep them, to still have them there, but they don't have a seat at the table. And I feel like, that's what many of them, like you like to use the word benefit, they benefit from using affirmative action, but when they use it, it's for them to get a seat at the table that the table's not even there for them, and
it's a good point.
And that's how, I say it, because, most of them are all good people. Some of them don't even, they don't even want to be part of the system. They're trying to create their own system and keep things fluctuating and flowing. Because when you look at, and I don't want to shock people about this, but when you look at many interracials, towards many people feel, it's mostly Europeans. It's actually mostly those who are Latin, Hispanic descent, and Asian who tend, not to date outside, would tend to basically, will go outside their race and mostly date someone who is, of melatonin and whatnot. Many people who are white just tend to date outside their race and whatnot. That's pretty common. Next is, it's Black. But just even looking at that, it's just it's crazy. But this is the reason why we always have this weird friction and whatnot. Because I know many Asians who tend to only work with Asians and Asians alone. Does that bother me? No, but they want to, they know that if they get someone who is European, they know that they might not do for them. So that's why they will always do for themselves with their own people.
Right, which isn't a problem.
Which isn't a problem.
Yeah, they want to circulate money within their community, which is fine. I mean, racial groups should do that. And really, Black people need to do that more.
And sorry to cut you off, Ms. Knight. The reason why many of us don't do it is because they don't even believe within the own people, within our own community. Because we're more divided than mostly everyone else, we're the only people who will never support ourselves but support somebody else, And I tell people, I probably support more Black businesses than many people than I know. Because I know several business owners who are perfectly Black. And do I support them? Every single time that I do, every single day, But if I know that you're doing something, I always tell everyone, show me what you got, let me see it, and And if you got something good, I'll definitely be a part of it, you know? But that is the reason why, I wouldn't say why we're here, but this is the reason why nothing doesn't keep growing within us. You know?
Yeah, so just to wrap things up for us, fellas, and I want to make a few clarifying statements. So first thing first, I want to clarify that Asian, that term actually refers to that continent, which is made up of more than just Orientals,
right,
who are representative of China and Japan and etc. That also includes India. India is a country within the continent of Asia, right? So is Russia. So that, just to clarify that. So we're specifically talking about Oriental. And I just want to make a few clarifications. So in my opinion, or at least I want to make a few clarifications on the statements I've previously made. So in my opinion, there are multiple topics we're discussing here. We're not still just on the Atlanta shooting and what occurred, right? We're talking about the Atlanta shooting, the captain's comments. At this point, we're talking about whether or not the Oriental community or other minorities have Black support, and to what extent that is. And then we're also talking about the Black community and what we need to do to see change. There's a lot of different areas, right? That's why we definitely need to have that specific session on racism. But just a few things I will say here. For this particular subject, and specifically to the victims who lost their lives, and to the families of those victims who were impacted, we here at The Good, the Bad, and the Truth are definitely sorry for your loss and your experience.
Yes,
I agree.
The captain's comments, I think we have all agreed, were beyond inappropriate. They were ridiculous. He has a responsibility, not only in his role as a captain of the department, researching and investigating that incident, but also as a human being, to not make excuses for someone who just committed such heinous crimes. That was not his responsibility to speak on that, whether those were his thoughts or not. In regards to the Black community support of Oriental Americans, Asian Americans, or other minorities in general, my specific thoughts on the subject, again, are that I understand both sides. I understand the argument that we as a community have to focus on some of the outstanding issues that we face within ourselves, right? Which those topics and subjects varies. Supporting Black business, what all the different crime elements. I'm never going to say Black on Black crime because it's bullshit. It doesn't exist. Crime is crime in general. Right. Black on Black crime is a term that the media coined in order to deter from the fact that just as much crime in each individual community happens, right? Most of the time, a victim is accosted by someone of their own race. Okay, that's another rabbit hole I'm not even going to go down. But the point is, at the end of the day, the overall subject that we're discussing has human beings who lost their lives. And this sheriff, this captain in this sheriff's department, what we've all three agreed on was completely out of pocket for his comments. And, we hope that the full extent of repercussions that he should face, he does. And I think we've all agreed on that aspect of it. Yeah. So unless anyone has anything else they absolutely have to get out on any of these subjects, I think we'll wrap it up. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I just real quick, because I know we want to wrap it up. And you know, this is a podcast where we more or less peel back the layers. I know with my commentary, I like to peel back the layers, because these things aren't always, for lack of a better phrase, black or white. No pun intended. Black and white. No pun intended.
Absolutely.
But just touching on the media real quick, because I know you mentioned the media. Just touching on that real quick. So what has been happening is, and this actually coincides with the Black community and our indifference and things like that. But what has been happening is the mainstream media has been trying to blame Black people for the attacks on Asians. Now, I'm not talking about the Atlanta shooting. I'm not talking about that specifically. But there have been other attacks on Asians that have taken place. And the mainstream media has been basically pinpointing or focusing on Black people so-called carrying out these attacks. Now, prior to the Atlanta shooting, Black people were basically the main people being blamed. Now that this mass shooting has come about and people have seen who the shooter is, they know that white supremacy is on the move. The mainstream media, and I'm gonna just say it outright, the mainstream media, being the white supremacist organism that it is, will always try to figure out how to make Black people the bad guys. When it comes to crimes committed against Asians by, for example, white perpetrators, the media doesn't really focus too much on it, or they don't focus on it for too long. For example, back in 2017, I want to make sure I get her name right. Ying Zhang was abducted, beaten, raped, dismembered, and placed in 3 separate trash bags. And back in 2017. In 2019, 3 Asian men were attacked by a hammer. 1 died and 2 were critically injured. And the last one, because obviously this could keep going, in 2020, an Asian man by the name of Angelo Quinto died after a cop kneeled on his neck for 5 minutes. Kneeling on necks sounds familiar.
Right.
The fact is, these were all incidents done by white perpetrators. And there are more of these where they came from, but there was no heavy media coverage. And when these incidents were covered, race really wasn't brought up. But when a Black person gets into a physical altercation with an Asian, the media makes sure to cover that. Now, the thing is crime, but those crimes that I mentioned that were done by white men, I'll just be straight up and say you'd be hard pressed to find ones where Black people have done those same exact crimes. So with all of this in mind, we have to remember that when crime is brought up, society, through the mainstream media, wants to make it clear that crime is synonymous with Black people. They did this with the war on drugs. I mean, they make crime synonymous with Black people. So this is why when, for example, when a white person commits a crime, basically they were having a bad day. Us same people out here in the real world understand that the notion of having a bad day is a bunch of crap. And it is really just an excuse afforded to white people. Now, to just wrap it up in regards to the Atlanta shooting, hate crime is hate crime, and it should be punished. No matter which race the hate crimes are committed against, the perpetrators need to be punished. I will say that even though I am pro-Black, that doesn't mean that I'm anti everyone else. Some of my talking points in regards to the Atlanta shooting and everything else were simply addressing the elephants in the room. And I said elephants with an S. What we all know is what took place was a tragedy. And honestly, I hope that this terrorist gets punished to the fullest extent. With that being said, I also won't lose sight of the fact that all of the media coverage of the hate that Asians have been receiving is basically another way to shift the attention off of anti-Black racism at the hands of white supremacy. it was basically a way to change the subject off of things like, for example, defunding the police, which was a big thing that was, being put out there. And there's been a lot of talk about reparations. So this was all kind of these attacks obviously took place and they're real and they're heinous, and we know that, but the media aspect of it, the media part, was basically a smokescreen to basically shift attention away from Black issues. So that I'm gonna just say that.
We don't need another race war. We just don't.
I'm sorry, go ahead, E-Man.
All I just said, we don't need another race war. We don't need it. We don't need it at all.
No, we don't.
We really don't.
Unfortunately, it's going on, but
it's going on. But I hope to all our listeners that we can use our intelligent mind and let's get it together. And I'm just leaving it. That's the last thing I'm going to say for the day. Last thing.
All right. Well, fellas, I appreciate you as always. Great energy today. I think we covered some really tough subjects. I think this was probably the most racially driven session that we've had so far, right? Or at least the subjects.
Yeah. I agree.
So this is definitely going to be a great session once released. And then, of course, to our audience, we always release mini sessions with the individual subjects that we discuss. As always, we appreciate you all here at The Good, the Bad, and the Truth.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
If you haven't yet, we implore you to go ahead and go on YouTube and subscribe to that channel so you can get all the latest updates and notices when we release this juicy content.
Yeah,
we
subscribe,
also
share all that.
Exactly,
do everything.
Do all that, everything. We will be sharing also the links to some of the items that we discussed, and we appreciate your patronage. We look forward to hollering at y'all. Peace, everyone.
We out. We out.
Yeah.
We out. We out.